right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. First and foremost, it's Thursday, Data and AI Summit. I hope you all have enjoyed the show so far. Ton of amazing product announcements, and of course, a lot of amazing healthcare and life sciences sessions throughout the show this week. My name's Adam Crown. I lead industry marketing for healthcare and life sciences here at Databricks. I've been responsible for our industry experience at the show, and it's just been amazing to see not only all of the innovations that are coming out from Databricks, but the amazing customer stories and how they're leveraging the data intelligence platform to take that intelligence and bring it directly to caregivers, to patients, to staff, to make them more productive, to help advise on the next best action so patients are living healthier lives, among other things. And I couldn't be more excited about today's session, transforming healthcare with Databricks Marketplace and some of the real-world data sharing lessons. And I can't be up here talking by myself about some of these real-world data sharing lessons without having some amazing customers on stage with me today. So I'm first and foremost going to introduce Casey as well as Jeff in a few slides here. But what I wanted to do is set the stage for today's discussion, set some context around the role of data sharing and collaboration and why it's so critical in industry, things that are helping make that collaboration possible through open standards like Delta sharing, and how organizations like Definitive Healthcare, where Casey resides from, and Kythera Labs, where Jeff represents, are using the technology today to help enable their customers even faster on their data and AI initiatives. So first and foremost, if you all didn't know already, data sharing is a really big opportunity across every single industry. You know, we've heard from a number of customers this week just how they're taking data from silos, from electronic health records, from the healthcare provider space, to lab information systems, for instance, in the life sciences space, all the way to health tech organizations who are helping unlock next best action for their patients. You know, the reality about this data is it's locked in all of these silos. But when these organizations can tap into the full potential of their data, they're seeing amazing results. You know, we were at our HLS industry forum a little bit earlier this week. We had some amazing customers speaking. In fact, I see Cecilia Collins from Mercy here. She was talking about how the data they're using is helping make their nursing staff even more efficient as they take better care of patients, all the way through to being more predictive about how they're bringing intelligence to their teams so they can keep patients healthier and, of course, happier. And that's so critically important in our industry. You know, healthcare, I'm sure all of you are here just like me. It's an incredibly personal place to be. You know, we're all going to be patients one day, or we're going to be caring for others who are patients. And we want to make sure that they have the right care at the right time. And that is all rooted in data intelligence. So when we think about the power of data sharing today, organizations that maximize this data sharing are seeing a tremendous amount of economic value, as evidenced by organizations like Gartner finding a 3x improvement in the value that organizations can create. And the foundation to that is an open approach to sharing that maximizes your organization's impact, whether you're a healthcare provider, life sciences organization, payer, health tech organization, to be able to reach more patients, more providers, more staff, and then ultimately have an impact on industry. We'd love to do a little Q&A here really briefly, just to show of hands, who's coming from the healthcare provider space? Who's representing a health system, hospital? Okay, so we have about 40% of the room. Life sciences organizations, how many do we have here? All right, fantastic. Payers, any payers? Lovely. And then health tech organizations. Awesome. So we've got a fairly good representation across the healthcare and life sciences ecosystem. And no matter whether you're a healthcare provider, payer, life sciences organization, or health tech company, you will benefit from this ability to share intelligence with your organizations. And the reason for that is you can innovate faster at scale. You can unlock innovation through data analytics and AI by sharing data, and not just data, but also notebooks and tables, code from your teams that others can immediately take advantage of. You have access to the broadest ecosystem. And most importantly, in our industry, because it's so security prone, we need to make sure that we're protecting all of that incredibly important information while maximizing our ability to get information into the hands for those that need it. So from the Databricks perspective, we're enabling this sort of innovation, this sort of sharing through multiple different modalities today. And what we're going to be focusing on is Databricks Marketplace. And we've got some amazing Marketplace customers and partners with us here in the room that are going to share their perspectives as a data provider, as well as a data consumer, And unfortunately, we weren't able to have one of our presenters join us from POCN, Therese Grevel, but she has a wonderful story with Kythera Labs that Jeff's going to speak a little bit to from the data consumer perspective, how they're turning on their use cases even faster as a result. So the Databricks Marketplace, for those that aren't familiar with it, it's our capability to be able to bring data, analytics, and AI to all of you by way of open standards, including Delta sharing. And so today, we're really proud to announce that since launching Databricks Marketplace last year, we've had tremendous growth in the number of providers that are on the marketplace, but also those organizations that are consuming that data. And that tells us that there's absolute demand here to be able to get all of this intelligence directly to your organizations. In the healthcare and life sciences space in particular, I'm incredibly proud of organizations from HealthVerity to IQVIA to Definitive Healthcare to Kythera Labs to John Snow Labs. All of these organizations are represented here on our Databricks Marketplace. And at the end of the show, we'll kind of show you some of those listings they have today. Encourage you to take a look at the marketplace and be able to interact with their data. And of course, get started very quickly leveraging these open standards. So without further ado, I'd love to get a little bit of a background from Casey, a little bit of a background from Jeff, and we'll talk a little bit about some of their perspectives. And we'll kind of orient it around the challenges they saw before they leveraged Databricks, the power of the technology, the data intelligence platform, and Delta sharing. And then we're going to also talk about some perspectives about how data consumers are using this technology today, and ultimately the value that they're driving for their own organization. So Casey, tell us a little bit more about you as an individual, and then of course your organization, Definitive Healthcare.
Hi everyone, my name is Casey Eastlack and I head up our professional services organization at Definitive. So my team is generally responsible for delivering value in terms of claims data to our customers. So Definitive Healthcare is a healthcare, commercial intelligence, and medical affairs data company. So we provide data across the entire healthcare ecosystem to customers, just across anything that touches anything in healthcare. So our largest customers are in the life sciences and provider vertical, but there are other customers too that really need areas of support in terms of data and healthcare. So food vendors or anything that's in a hospital. So things like Kimberly-Clark. So that is what we generally cover at Definitive. And I hail to you folks with a little bit over 10 years of experience in healthcare and data analytics.
Awesome. Want to advance the slide?
Sure. Yeah. Great. And then in terms of what we do here at Definitive, so we are largely a data SaaS platform. So we provide data across the entire continuum. So we have data on claims, medical claims, prescription activity, key opinion leaders. We also take that data that drives our SaaS tool and provide quite a bit of analytics on top of that. So promotional analytics, APLD, so anonymized patient level data, as well as data visualizations to really allow folks to capture their target market or areas where we focus at Definitive. And again, as I said earlier, we largely are in the healthcare and life sciences space. So in terms of med tech and biopharma, we are helping our customers try to determine when they're about to go and launch into market, where are the best key targets for them to launch into. And then once they are in their market, we help them facilitate additional growth.
Awesome. Jeff, tell us a little bit about you and your organization as well.
Sure. So funny fact here, Kythera Labs are founding members of the team. Back in the day, we signed our first deal with Databricks. The entire employee base of Databricks would fit in this room. That's over 8 years ago. So I look at this and I'm like, whoa. So we're a tech company first. We've been in the healthcare analytics and data space for a few companies now. A couple logos up there that I've either created or worked for in the past. And so when we started Kythera Labs just under 5 years ago, my birthday's coming up in a few weeks, we realized that the problem is not even just about data. It's about the subject matter expertise and experience. So over the years, we've tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code specifically on Databricks. And what we realized is there's a lot of times people don't understand some of the biases and issues in the underlying data, and they wonder why they don't get the answers that they should, so they just go buy more data. And then they buy more data, and they buy more data. This is an industry right now, doesn't matter which sector of the market. You have to do more with less faster, period. And this marketplace is where we're kind of betting the farm on, so to speak, is the technology of the catalog, the sharing capability, uniform and federation. So Kythera is a tech-first company. We serve a lot of the same client types. We have, I think, a slide here, which direction? Why don't you run it? The big thing is that we're a built-on partner, so all the code we run, we build on Databricks, and then we've got some exciting announcements of how that code can be run in any Databricks environment. So we're using the marketplace for building analytical schemas and analytical data models, and we're serving all segments of the market. So very unique capabilities in the context of the tech. In a lot of ways, we really don't care where the data comes from. So it could be shared from someone else and we can transform it in new ways and very insightful ways.
Awesome. Jeff, thanks for that. I think that's fantastic. So, part of our panel today is let's just identify some of the ways that, our organizations that we work with are interacting with their data today and how they're sharing it across the ecosystem. So I think first and foremost, let's start with what are some of the challenges? Many of you are probably facing the same issue today, or you're seeing that across healthcare. So, when we think about a lot of the ways that we share data in the past, email, SFTP, rudimentary methods that make it incredibly challenging to be able to consume the data in a way that's near real time. And so for a lot of organizations, that's posing not only a security risk, but also if you think about our ability to take that data and quickly turn it into insights, we have tremendous delay. I had a friend recently in the industry who's a data analyst. He's trying to interact with one of his team members through email. And so they sent the file over email, and it was supposed to be 100 megabytes. In fact, it came over as a very small amount of data. And so they had to go back over email, and there's a bunch of back and forth to the point where it transpired over the course of the day, which lost time for them to be able to run that data, run the analytics, and ultimately be able to deliver value to the business, to be able to understand what do we need to go do next from that point. So, Casey and Jeff, let's start with you, Casey. What are some challenges in the industry before you went to Delta sharing that you saw from your own organization?
Absolutely. So I think, again, prior to Delta sharing, we were largely an SFTP shop and still do support that for some customers. I think one of the biggest challenges in that ecosystem is that everything has to go perfectly every single time. So a lot of our customers would come to us and say, we need these exact specifications of how we receive the data. So zip, gzip, this specific delimiter, et cetera. And then every time we would have to enable that, make sure, one, there's a lot of error handling on our side to make sure there's nothing that goes wrong. But then two, is there staff and infrastructure on their side to actually support the uptake, ETL, and actually moving that into their system. So what happens is customers maybe get a little bit lazy, right? If there's an error, they're like, I'm just not gonna load the data. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in that perspective is it gets really stale really quick, even though they might have access to it on a more frequent basis. And I think that also poses a challenge too, because especially in the healthcare ecosystem, quality is so important, and keeping it timely is important too. So if two members of the same company are looking at what they think is the same data set, sometimes it's not. And they go, hey, this is a quality problem, this is your problem. So, and they also might be making business decisions based on that. So it is super important that using Delta sharing allows kind of that process to be eliminated, right? So there's a single source of truth for customers that they can leverage, and there doesn't have to be kind of the lazy lack of ETL processing that's happening.
Jeff, what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, so we process claims daily, medical RX claims, EMR records, notes, like a lot of unstructured content coming in as well. And when you think about, very similar to what Casey said, the challenge for any organization, if you're in the digital space, you think about, okay, I have a constant growth of that data, and it can create a linear cost problem, especially if, like for us, we're serving well over 50 clients, copies of data, more with less, kind of connected at that. Internally, dev, test, prod, we're talking about 4 petabytes of data. Think about doubling that, or just doubling the customer base. We're talking about 100 petabytes in 2 years? Anyone find a problem with that? So that cost problem is a massive issue. Obviously, I don't have to bring up any names. There have been numerous breaches in the past 3 to 4 months. We don't have to talk about it. We know. Legacy technology, SFTP servers, vulnerabilities, and a lot of code. Stuff's been working for years. Am I monitoring that code base, the underlying kernel? Like, we're talking about so many different things. The email one makes me, brings me back to the early 2000s. But all these things are because of the legacy, but it's also because, unfortunately, our healthcare providers are trying to do more or less. They're in negative margin situations. Like, if we can't fix that, forget about it. So for us, that was kind of our mother of invention too, because we bootstrapped Kythera for the first 4 years. So we had to cut costs. We could not have linear growth in data storage. That was the wake-up call for us. Like, we were early, maybe a little too early on Unity, but we had to.
Yeah. But I think what you both bring up, which is a really interesting perspective, is we have to do more with less. We have to be able to move faster, but we have all of this legacy technology. How do we get from here to there? Healthcare as an industry is one of the fastest growing industries from a data perspective. There's a stat done by RBC Capital a few years ago that said we have 30% of the world's data and growing faster than most other industries. So if we don't have the right technology platform today or the right infrastructure to be able to ingest what is a growing set of petabytes of data on what is probably a daily basis, we're going to really struggle to be able to deliver that data to the business intelligence users, to the data scientist teams around artificial intelligence, and of course, Gen AI. So when we think about these models, good models require good data. And so how do we get all of this data across the electronic health record, from claims, from devices, among other things, directly into our platform so we can take advantage of all of that? So, Casey, I think one of the really interesting things is, both you and Jeff at Kythera and Casey at Definitive, you've talked about data as a product, that being a really critical component of being able to have the right infrastructure, bringing it into the platform, and then making it available to your own customers, whether it's internal or external. So I'd love if maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that and some of the critical components for getting from here to there so you can start to address these scale challenges and, of course, the volume challenges of data.
Absolutely. So I think before we had the option of Delta sharing in the marketplace, we were just generally leveraging notebooks, DB SQL, et cetera, to run ad hoc analyses for our customers, right? So I think that helps us get to, one customer here, one customer there, one customer there. There's no scalability with that, right? There's no repeatability opportunity for us to say, hey, these are some shared opportunities that we should be doing. Now we're leveraging Delta sharing specifically to get out some of our data products to our customers. So we generally are a SaaS company, but there are a ton of users within our SaaS companies that it just doesn't make sense for them to be going day to day into a sales or marketing tool, right? So they want to be going and using Databricks to get the data that they get out of our SaaS platform day to day. So that is just generally our general use case for Delta sharing, as well as we have used it for our APLD product, right? So that, for the folks who don't know here, are anonymized patient level data. So it is data that is tokenized. We strip out some information on the patient so that it can't be identified back. So Delta sharing is actually one of the few technologies that we feel comfortable leveraging to share that data across the customers, right? So that's been an opportunity for us to say, hey, this is a product that we sell using Delta sharing. And then lastly, specifically, is the Databricks Marketplace. I'd say we've largely been using this to try to market to new customers that we haven't found before. But then also, too, how do we start to think about data as a product and putting out an MVP. So maybe we're not ready to build that into our SaaS product. We want to build a model, build a new data asset, put some analytics together. We'll put them out on the marketplace just to test to see what is the general desire that customers are looking for and start to just have a conversation with them, right? So this is a way to kind of very easily beta test new products as opposed to just generally going through a full development cycle.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for weighing in on that. I think that's great. And then, Jeff, from your perspective, as you think about data as a product, kind of walk us through how you all are approaching that today.
Yeah, last year hot topic was medallion architecture. Everyone talks about it. Best practices, ingestion pipelines from raw data, leveraging the kind of data lake of old. It's gotten old in 5 years. But the fundamental for us is that thinking about that product and leveraging catalogs as the foundation for managing internal development, testing, release management has been a substantial accelerator. And because we don't want to be in what I'll say is just selling data, people need answers. No one wants to buy data. Like you want answers. That's why you buy data. And so if that's the case, moving through that medallion architecture and get to another level, we'll call it platinum, which is literally answer ready or fit for purpose. Think of what you would use to train something like AI. Do you really think claims data is a good source of answers for an LLM to try to interpret? No. So the productization side for us is trying to take advantage of where AI is going. Genie room testing and so forth, we proved a lot of that. It required an entirely different approach, which also then exposed some of the risks and issues around sharing to maintain privacy and attestation for expert determination. Because otherwise, we could just be making copies of data again in order to maintain that privacy. So architecture now has to change. So there's a lot to this area that's super exciting for us, but at the end of the day, delivering a product to a client is not delivering something for them to ETL, but truly share.
I think you brought up a really good point, which is in our forum a little bit earlier this week, we were talking about context is so critical in healthcare and life sciences. We gave the example of HIPAA, CHF, AE, adverse event, all of these acronyms, when they're siloed, it's incredibly easy for a single business unit or organization to be able to understand it. But when you start to pull all of this data together, context of understanding what is the PMPM of CHF, congestive heart failure, for a given population of patients is so critical. And by bringing it through that data infrastructure in a way that's near real time, sounds like you both have seen a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes to, we have a big mantra internally, which is about going from the bedside to the clinical research bench. It's a semantic problem. It's an ontological problem. So just imagine you have 20, 30 terabytes of data. Now you want to make a copy of it for a new user and add new features to it. Like, I'm not a scientist, I got one back there, but some of these terminologies aren't just a nice crosswalk. So the complexity of the engineering effort in this is why the rest of what's inside the Databricks stack is so critical. The computational aspect, the serverless architecture. There's a lot of the stuff about data federation that comes into play that is ridiculously exciting about today's keynote. So for us, that far right side is the marketplace construct. Right? It's the code base. The left side has to all happen for quality. I think the elephant in the room, data quality is an issue. But the privacy preservation and maintaining sharing requires an entirely another interpretation of that data sharing architecture. And that's what's super exciting.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point here. So we're bringing in all of this data, we're getting that data foundation right, we're being able to move quickly, but we also probably want to think about balancing speed with security. So we talk with a lot of customer executives, and one of the biggest challenges in healthcare being a very team-oriented sport, how do we make sure we get buy-in from the CIO, the CFO, and of course the CISO as we think about securing what is some of the most targeted data on the planet? How do we make sure that we're governing it holistically so we can then give it to the people that can then make the most out of this data? So, Casey, let's talk a little bit about Unity Catalog, which, being from the data intelligence platform, is our ability to provide data governance. What are some of the things that are really foundational as you're providing data as a product and unlocking that data that otherwise is being trapped in siloed systems?
Absolutely. So I think data privacy, security are just of the utmost importance in healthcare and life sciences. So that is one of the things that we keep into account all the way from the second that we get the raw data in-house to the curated data that we share directly with our customers. So I think one of the big things you have to think about in terms of specifically things like claims data, there are rules and regulations for what you can and can't do. There are HIPAA certification processes that you have to do downstream, to Jeff's point, before it can be served up. So there are very specific rules that we put in place at each step of that medallion architecture to make sure that things are put in place appropriately. And then once we get to the marketplace step, right, that's a whole different ballgame, right? So we need to make sure that we're not sharing data directly with customers that maybe they don't license to or they aren't allowed to use. So we have to make sure that we put out data that is dummy data. So, but it's representative of what we can do as a company, but also too, they can't necessarily draw insights from that. So again, I think it's in terms of that security is making sure it happens along the way in your process. It's not just at the very end when you're like, okay, we're ready to serve it up to a customer. You have to be thinking about HIPAA regulations and removing codes in opportunities where people might be identifying data throughout the full spectrum of that opportunity.
And then Jeff, when you think about the data governance component, how are you all navigating that today?
So I've dropped a couple of hints about architecture, right? So there's some really unique ways to do this, but just use an example. 50 different customers, all having similar data. They could even be inside one enterprise. And someone wants to do some research study, determine if a population at risk has access to care. And we add something called SDOH data. We're gonna do a join, right? We've just added a level of risk to that. Well, the fundamental is, even within an organization, at one department, if the token scheme, the matching scheme, is the same as someone else in the same organization, you've just increased the risk of re-identification within that enterprise. So we've spent a lot of time, I think, going back in history. There's a few companies, mentioned HealthVerity, Datavant are kind of the two big guys that you hear a lot about at the conference. And phenomenal business has been created. There are always challenges because a lot of times you have to SFTP or make a copy of the file to maintain that privacy. And if you have issues with data quality, tokenization, matching, how do you update and maintain that record when you find out that this token is actually this? It's like the enterprise master patient index problem side of a provider. We're doing it at 300+ million lives scale. Tens of billions of records, I think trillions computation. But how do you maintain that? Imagine having to regenerate a pipeline of all that versus sharing. So what we did is we created a framework where it allowed us to have a really unique architecture to not copy that, but maintain unique attestation within the enterprise and across the industry. So no two clients would ever have the same tokens, but no human has to intervene to make sure it's maintained, and no copy had to be. That was a genius moment, because if we didn't figure it out, we would have gone out of business before we raised our first capital. But it was one of those things that has been critical. And as a result, the before and after, that token strategy, having a failure affected the continuum of care, it's literally changed the continuity of care visibility, our ability to statistically determine evidence-based guidelines and advanced machine learning models. It was essential to be able to do it at scale, which could then allow us to correct token mismatches. So there's a lot under the covers of this one, but it's been an incredibly important thing working with the researchers, and they're going, this makes no sense. I've got a breast cancer cohort I'm trying to study, and I'm seeing a lack of continuity. And we were able, through that study and lab results, to be able to connect all that data back longitudinally. So much so now that's a training data set for an internal use case that they can now run on real live patient data because you had training data. So you didn't fix the problem. You couldn't have built the model. You wouldn't have had the confidence, and people would have thrown their hands up and said, well, I guess that POC failed. When you're bootstrapped, you can't afford to fail. You just can't afford to. So that mother of invention moment resulted in a lot of this stuff, and that's where perfect combination of what Databricks was releasing, getting in on really early on development and previews that made all the difference for us.
It was amazing. I mean, Casey and Jeff, you both talk about some really excellent solutions you're bringing directly to your customers and insights that are having impacts, on patients around the world. When I think about moving from here to there, we've talked a little bit about how you've approached it. But when you think about organizations who are in the audience here, who are probably going through a very similar journey, words of wisdom, and Casey, we'll start with you. What are some of the things that you wish you would have known when you started that would have helped you all accelerate? What are some of those gotchas that maybe some of these folks out here in the room are starting to think about? Or maybe they hadn't, and they'll be able to take this away from the session today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a few things here. So again, we are largely a data provider. We do some consumption in terms of thinking about it from a Databricks perspective. But I think just the power of Delta sharing is incredible. I think whether you are a provider or a consumer. So I think, going back to one of my earlier points and what they said in the keynote, in healthcare, time to value is the most critical piece, right? Especially when you're thinking about healthcare data. If you make a purchase of data and you can't action on it within the first few months, why did you even make the purchase, right? So opportunity to use DeltaShare to get data in the door faster and be able to set it up for your analytics teams is super, super important. I think a specific example of that, right, is in the biopharma space. If you have a drug treatment for a very, very novel disease area, you want to be able to find out the second a patient gets diagnosed for one of your key indications, right? So that you can target that physician and say, hey, I have this drug out there, and start your marketing campaigns, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is in terms of Delta sharing, it is so, so important to be using that as a consumer. I think too, there's also opportunity for like, especially bigger companies, right? If you're at a company where you have maybe 5 different MDM solutions, how can you use something like Delta sharing to provide one unified data asset within your organization, right? So again, it gets down to that quality problem. If you have, your 5 different business units, 2 of you might be getting the same data asset, maybe from Kythera or Definitive in-house, but you're not talking to each other, right? I think opportunities to make sure that you're talking to the other business units and other opportunities to say, what's our single source of truth? How do we create that medallion architecture across the company is super, super important from that perspective. And I think lastly, we're also seeing a bit of a shift in the industry. I'd say specifically when we think about data. So in the past, we would see most of the folks who are in charge of purchasing the data are the end users, right? That is actually changing a little bit. So the folks in this room are actually the people who are going to be in charge of understanding what data do you need in-house? How do you compare it to your competitor? What is the fastest way to get it to your analytics teams and downstream users? So make sure you keep that to your advantage and say, what are the technologies I should be using on top of the data, right? It shouldn't just be which data do I want, it's what data and technology should we be using together.
Jeff, words of wisdom. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's never too late to think crazy. We have a principle, 3 horizons, right? So 70% of our efforts in the core, nothing new. Google has this, right? 20% is on what's coming next, and the third is the moonshot. It's something crazy out there that's emerging. The rate at which change is occurring is staggering. Databricks obviously fueling it. For us, rationalizing, unifying a strategy around data is essential. Unity Catalog by far is the biggest opportunity there, with obviously uniforms announcements, what's going on there, brilliant idea by the way, is the next big area. So to me, it's always about architecture and context of business problems, doing more with less. And you're going to find most of the issues are lack of a unified architecture. The sprawl, I've been in healthcare for over 30 years. I should have stopped at 20 and just said over 20, but now I know how old I am. But the idea there is that we have gone through in the last 12 years, Kythera the team has built over 5 tech stacks in 12 years. Netezza boxes, Hadoop clusters, MySQL databases, throwing more CPUs at stuff, Oracle data, now, stop making decisions about infrastructure. Start making decisions about intelligence. So we had a talk yesterday about the lean data factory. I'm a lean manufacturing practitioner. There is really important questions that have to be asked in order to create the optimal architecture of the future. So I would say, think about the moonshot and the only way you're going to get there and what would have had to go wrong for you not to achieve it.
Jeff, that was great. I really appreciate you offering some words of wisdom. What I've heard from today is, and what I've taken away from a lot of conversations with customers, we have tremendous amount of data in healthcare, really hard to keep up. We have tremendous potential to bring intelligence to everybody inside of our organization and out by providing data as a product, just as these 2 organization leaders have been telling us today. It starts with unifying all of your data in a single place, securing and governing it. That is so critical in our industry, as we've learned. Infusing it with intelligence, and then being able to share it across the ecosystem with standards like Delta sharing to instantly deliver it to our customers, whether it's internal or external. So one thing I'd like for you all to take away is on the Databricks marketplace, we have both Definitive Healthcare as well as Kythera Labs data sets. Would you like to plug a little bit of your data sets on the marketplace today, Jeff?
Yeah, a lot of times again, back to you don't want to buy data, you want answers. So realistically, an analytics data model is often a better way to go at it than buying raw data. So on the marketplace, you'll see there's oncology assets, there's chronic disease assets, there's assets that take into account an entire patient journey. So we have a couple samples of that. We have notebooks up there. Our product team's done a great job of giving you the best way to look at it. The biggest thing is that code is coming to the marketplace. So you could run it in your own Databricks environment. So
Awesome. Yeah, and just like we talked about, Databricks Marketplace is not just about data, but it's also about models, table views, among other things as well. Casey, tell us a little bit about your data sets on Marketplace today.
Absolutely. Similar to Jeff there, we have a few of our curated data assets here on the marketplace. So again, how do we take our claims data asset, tie it to our reference data? So where are the actual HCPs and HCOs doing the claims, and what types of insights can we get from that? So again, some of these are patient triggers on prescriptions, as well as where the behavioral health facilities in the US. And so these are just a little bit of a flavor of what we have, just to have as a bit of a teaser on the marketplace.
Awesome, awesome. For everybody who's in the room here, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We appreciate it. We hope you at least took something away back to your organizations as you lead Data and AI Summit. And then we have just a few minutes left. So I'll allow folks to leave the room for those that would like. And for those that would like to stick around and ask some questions of our presenters, you're more than welcome to. Have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful rest of your Data and AI Summit. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, thank you.